Hello, my friends. Lori Ashcraft here. I'm your host for Viva La Evolution, which is sponsored by Recovery and Resilience Solutions, which is a training and consulting branch of Crestwood Behavioral Health. I'm very excited about our guests today. I have been looking forward to sharing them with you for some time. It's hard to get on their calendar because they're super busy, but here they are today, and they are Harvey Rosenthal and Len Statham of the Alliance for Rights and Recovery. You might remember NIAPSRS. Well, NIAPSRS got so much bigger than New York that Harvey and Len had to rethink what they called themselves. I'm not explaining this very well, but anyway, they are now the Alliance for Rights and Recovery, which is much more definitive in what they do because they reach way beyond New York. They help us in California a lot, all over the place. So I'm just so happy to have them with us today. And, I don't know if I've told you this before, but you can get continuing ed credits for watching most of these podcasts. I haven't gotten around to getting them all certified, but a lot of them are, and this one will be. So if you're interested in continuing ed credits, you can get them by watching this video and just taking the test, which I made up, so it's real easy. Well, it might not be, but I think it's kind of easy. Anyway, let me tell you what we're going to talk about. These are the learning objectives that we put together for today. One is understanding the mission and vision of the Alliance for Rights and Recovery. Like I said, it's expanded and it's very exciting. And then next is talking about the contributions that Harvey and Len have made through advocacy for peer support and for recovery. Next is understanding the value of peer support in medical and crisis settings. As we know, peers are everywhere else in the system at this point, and they are in those settings, but we want a much bigger presence in those settings because that's where people are really hurting and really need someone to walk alongside of them. And then we're going to talk a little bit about policy advocacy and system change. That's a real specialty of Harvey and Len's. And then we get to the end where we're developing skills for implementing peer-led programs. Peer-led programs make an amazing contribution, and we've had other folks here talk about this that are doing peer-led programs. You can just go back and look. There's several peer-led program people here. And there's a constant need for educating and supporting peer-led programs, just like any other program. But for some reason, we haven't given them really the support and financially and emotionally that they could use to survive in a pretty hectic world today. Anyway, okay, so that's what we're going to talk about, and please subscribe. It would help us out a lot, and it's real easy. I mean, we should have some fancy little button, which we don't. You just have to find it, and it's a little red thing off to the side. Okay, that's enough babbling from me. I'm so happy you're here. I'm happy to share these guys with you. So let's just get on with it. Okay. Harvey and Len, thank you so much for finding time to be with us today. I know how busy you both are. And I'm just so grateful that you've taken time to share some of your time with us because you both have remarkable recovery experiences. And Harvey, you've been around since the beginning of the movement. So you're going to know stuff that a lot of us don't know. Well, I might know because I'm probably older than you are. But anyway.
I'm 74.
Oh yeah, I'm older.
Okay.
Saturday's my birthday,
Oh,
and I'm
happy birthday.
81.
Wow. Good
Who
for
thought
you.
I'd live that long? Not
Good for
me.
you. That's great.
Okay.
Yes, I consider myself, people say that of me, that you were around at the beginning of the movement. Actually, I was not.
Hmm. Hmm.
I consider myself to be a half generation from Judy Chamberlain, Joe Rogers,
Ah,
people like that, Leonard Roy Frank. I came to the movement later, so I'll tell my story. You'll see. I didn't start from the movement. I came to the movement in the midst of my work and in my journey. So I just want to clarify that from the beginning. I mean, I can tell a little bit about it, how I wound up here, from where I started as a young person. So I'll do that if that's okay.
yeah, that sounds good. Good starting place.
So, we talk a lot about the othering people and
Mhm.
feeling like the other. Well, I think I was born like the other in my family. I know that. And in my community and in my society and in school, in my family, I didn't feel like I really was, belonged there. It wasn't a good fit. Uh, and My mother was very controlling, and I'm the opposite of that. I struggled for any control. We really, that wasn't a good fit, although, we loved each other. But I found that to be a really traumatic experience, a degree of control and the degree to which my own spirit was diminished or seen as not appreciated. What was appreciated was compliance. So it's no surprise to you that I've gotten into the work of fighting,
Yeah.
compliance, and wanting people not to feel like they're imprisoned or controlled or diminished for that reason. Um, so I found myself pretty much not fitting in and in any of these, and being alone for the most part. Um, It was the 60s, and during that period, I was really excited because it felt like there was more opening for people who were the other. There's a lot of othering going on in the most positive way.
Mhm.
Uh, Things that are greatly under attack today, and they're just
Mhm.
awful
Mhm.
on so many levels. But I found it to be such a thrilling period, and I felt hope that it was okay to come forward and be something, not a white bread, you know, sort of linear life. You do this, then you do this, then this happens. I couldn't have done that if I wanted to, so it was great to have an environment where it was okay not to. Um, and so the 60s came, and I was really embraced that.
Mhm.
I wasn't as groovy as I wanted to be, though. I wanted to be a hippie, and I think I many things are associated with that term, but I've never been a like, let it all hang out sort of guy. I'm very disappointed in that. I want to say that publicly. I'm just not groovy as I wanted to be from the 1960s.
I can
Wasn't
so
raised that
relate to what you're saying, Harvey, because for me, the 50s were so restrictive.
totally.
And when the 60s came along, I just felt like I could be myself finally. And I was a hippie that had to keep working because I was my only source of support. So I think I was a hippie. I was on the edge of hippiedom.
Well, I felt very akin to it, and I have to say that it feels to me we're in a climate now. I have thought all these years since the 60s that everything that's happened since will be offensive and will piss off the people who think like the 50s. And that's what's happened
Yeah,
is people
yes.
want to go back to the 50s. All of this that we've been a part of is now seen as, off the page, too liberal, too inclusive, too whatever, environmental, too diverse. But anyway, so I agree with you. I thought the 60s was an eye-opening. I decided the 50s were partly that way because of the trauma of World War II.
Mm.
And people just wanted it to be nice
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
to, have money and just have a simpler life.
Mhm.
But anyway, it didn't matter. I felt it was really oppressive too. Um, I did during that period. I went to college and at New York University when there was one in the Bronx. I didn't like that at all. I never liked school. I don't have a degree. I have a high school degree with 3 years worth of college.
Mhm.
I couldn't stand it, and I was glad not to have to do it. I consider it a personal achievement that I've been able to do this without having a college degree, because I found it, sort of demeaning to me. I became a cab driver when I dropped out of NYU. And then during the 60s, I went out to California in 69. I was already starting to feel depressed in those terms because I hadn't figured out what I did want to be. I knew what I didn't want to be, but so when I was going back to NYU after what was essentially a beautiful trip around the country to something I did to an uncertain future, and I became progressively depressed. And eventually I wound up in a mental hospital on Long Island, Mercy Hospital, Rockville Center. And I was there for 6 weeks. And they said if I had been there a couple of days longer, they would have given me shock therapy. Because the depression was severe. I remember it. And it was profound. And there was no bottom to it. You think you're going to hit bottom? No bottom here. It just kept going down. And I lost feeling in my body. I literally just felt so numb from the experience, so isolated. And when I was discharged from the hospital, went back to my parents' home. And the only time I left the house was to feed the ducks in the local pond and then hurry home, or to go see, art cinemas showing, old cool movies, and go see them in the back of the audience. So I knew they weren't looking at me. I had to feel like I wasn't being looked at. I was that self-conscious and that anxious and that so damaged by what had happened. But I think that experience sort of gave me feeling like a person who's naturally wanting to be free, growing up in totally not free environments, and then not knowing what to do next. Really was a quandary. I didn't know what would happen, but I came up to Albany because I had friends there. And I gravitated immediately towards the Kripalu Yoga Center, which was, I felt, a place that I could feel home with. I could be seen. I could, be the person that I felt inside. It was a lot of permission, a lot of, openness, spirituality, yoga, just the atmosphere of love. It was love.
What was the name of it again, Harvey?
It's called the Kripalu Yoga Center, Kripalu.
Okay.
And it was at one point an ashram. So when you go there, people, it'd be like the incense and, Hindi names, and it was just amazing. And to me, it was this oasis in a world that I wasn't sure what was going to happen. But I know I didn't want to come out of this experience and then have to face trying to have this linear life, this very straight life. So Kripalu was the first step saying, I know I relate to that, and that's a place to be free. I then took up John Lennon. I was very impressed with John Lennon and the scream therapy. I knew that I was so in my head and so dead that I wasn't going to think my way through this thing, that I have to feel my way through it. So he had, John Lennon had been through this therapy with Arthur Janov and about screaming. And I found something called bioenergetics, which was,
I remember that,
And I did that for a couple of years. It basically was a therapy that was working on looking at how your body has taken in all this pain and how to work through the body to release the pain and the memories and the traumas of the past. So I was very engaged in that. So, those were my main approaches towards dealing with things. I wound up as a cab driver. I wound up working eventually in the field. I had a young man who had developmental and mental health issues that I was matched with as a community service person. And I worked with him just, sort of as a big brother almost. And then a couple of years later, I was looking him up, and he was in a mental hospital in Troy, New York. And I was mortified by that because I didn't want to see people in hospitals, and I didn't, wanted to set him free from that. And they told me, okay, I said, I'm going to get something for him. I'll be back in a couple of days. They shipped him to the state hospital. So I can tell you who it was who sent him there and how angry I was. I went down to the state hospital, which is Hudson River State in the Poughkeepsie area. And they said to me, "We don't want him. You want him? We don't want him here."
Huh.
Uh,
Yeah.
I went back up to Albany and to an agency that worked with young people like that, and they said, "We don't have a place for him, but if would you be his family care parent for a little bit?" And
Mhm.
so I was.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
and I will say, ironically, he was presented to me as a person that had an arson history.
Mm.
And
Mm.
I will say to you that he never burned my house down,
Mm.
but he did burn somebody else's down a while after he was with me.
Mm. Mm.
But we had a very special relationship, and it was very sweet.
Mm.
But the agency that placed him with me said, "Boy, that was really cool. Do you want a job?" And
Oh, that's how it happened.
that's how it happened, you know. So I wound up working for this agency, and that led me to working for the state. And I moved quickly over to the state hospital because I wanted to. It's setting freedom is a very big value for me. You can understand growing up the way I did why freedom would be so important. And helping people get free of hospitalization and being a mental patient and feeling abnormal and devalued and frightened and ashamed, powerless. All those things have been the thing I've worked, just offend me, make me angry, make me want to do something about that. So I worked in the state hospital, but I've also been a person who's strategic. And so I was out with the people who were inpatients in 1977. But when I tried to talk like a peer in a treatment review, they acted like I was from a foreign planet and devalued what I had to say. So
Mhm.
I said, okay, well, I'm still going to be me and do this peer thing. And I'm just going to, do what I do on the margins of what they're doing. Um, so I wound up working in the inpatient unit for a period of time. It was an awful place to work. It was everything I thought it might be. People were being told they would never cover. They were talked about, they could be standing right next to people and they'd be being talked about
Yeah,
by other people deciding their lives.
yeah.
Um, and the whole concept of low functioning and schizophrenia and,
Mhm. Mhm.
relapse is inevitable. All that was floating around.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, I switched over to an outpatient clinic where I wanted to work with people and something, more hopeful and more about life in the community. But there I was told, don't use the word recovery because you're giving people false hope.
Oh, yes.
I was told,
Those were the
don't
early days of the movement. Yeah.
70, 77. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, so eventually I left. I was approached by someone to say, we have a clubhouse program in the state hospital and they want to move it out into the community.
Mm. Mm.
And they give it to the MHA of Albany County, which there was at one point. And I came over to work for them and move the club into the
Mm.
community.
Mm.
And I love Clubhouse. I still
Mm.
do. I think the community that it fosters, the sense of family, is always a place to go, welcome, wanted, and needed. You
Something
know,
to do.
what's that?
Something to do.
Something to do.
Mm.
We have a phrase, I mean, getting ahead of myself. We have a phrase we talk a lot about hospitalization in this world and discharging people and bad discharges. And we always say a good discharge, a person to be with, a peer bridger, a
Yeah.
place to live, housing first, and a
Yeah.
place to go, a clubhouse.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Because it
good.
is that for so many.
Mm.
Ironically, several nights ago, I walked into a pizza shop and a fellow said, "Is your name Harvey?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "I remember you from the club." This is a,
Oh,
but this is a man he was homeless.
yeah.
He's been alone. He hasn't had a community. And the last he remembers is something 15 years, 20 years ago called the Potpourri Club. So that it just drives home the importance of having a place to go and people to be
Yes.
with
Yeah.
and having a family and him
Mm.
not having that and remembering back and connecting with me that we once were part of this
Yeah.
family.
Yeah.
That was so special.
Belonging is, I think, such a basic human need.
Clubhouses were set aside partly because they were sort of to some people, and I could see why. End of the line, sit rock and smoke, day room of a state hospital type
Mm.
of places. Some of them were like that.
Yeah, some.
Uh, and eventually they were all taken down in New York. But anyway, I in this as director of the club, we did some marvelous things, and
Mm.
I'll just skip over that to say, um, that we formed a club association, psychosocial club association, that was very modest. But I was in Albany and I saw what the advocates could do in Albany. And I was telling Luke this the other day. I got the bug. I walked down to the Capitol,
Mm.
and and you could walk in and they would meet with you. Could meet with the legislative staff.
Uh,
The secretaries were polite. I didn't expect that from government.
yeah,
I thought it was going to be very hostile.
yeah.
And I got the bug about policy and watching the other advocates and felt we should have an army. We should be at the table. Our people should be at the microphone, not labor unions and family members and providers and such like that.
Mm.
Um, and so we were eventually able to get a grant, and I came over to set up the New York Association of Psychosocial Rehab Services as a paid organization.
Mm.
And from there, we eventually became NIAPRS in the Alliance.
Mm. Mm.
I can say more about that if you'd like.
Yeah, let's do talk a little bit more about that. Um,
So at that point, the club was I thought, a really, fairly, it's not a peer program as some might want it to be or say it is. It's not really peer run in the full sense,
mhm.
but there's a lot more power sharing and intimacy and disclosure and, real celebration and grieving, just doing things together.
Mm.
Um, so when we became the Association of Clubs, I really wanted to bring certainly that idea of power sharing. We weren't going to be a trade association for providers.
Mhm.
I wouldn't let executive directors sit on the board. I did not want to be pushed into essentially, we need more money. We want this organization to get us more money. I don't want to be we don't want to be a trade association.
Mhm.
However, we understood we wanted to support recovery providers,
Mhm. Mhm.
but we always made it clear that the people came first. We're here for people's rights, their dignity, their full lives.
Mhm.
And providers that have been with us all these years know that. They know that we respect them, we support them, we love that they have same values we have,
Mhm.
but our job is ultimately about the people, their rights,
Mhm.
their hope, their dignity, their lives in general. To close 5 state hospitals. And the usual advocates were there, but we brought the people themselves to the Capitol again and again. And we came to a place where I said we weren't going to leave until the Governor Mario Cuomo signed this bill and closed
Mm.
5 state hospitals.
Mm.
And we came every day for like 8 days. And when the governor signed the bill at Fountain House, he said it's because of those people that wouldn't go away. Because
Oh
I didn't want to
gosh.
do this, he said.
Yeah, it works, doesn't it?
It did. Yeah. So that money, called reinvestment money, gave birth to the recovery and peer movement in New York.
Mm. Mm.
And we used that money, NIAPRS at the time, to create what became the Peer Bridger model.
Oh, that's
Um,
how that started then.
they gave us
Oh.
money. The money was being Darby Penny was the staff person there and Consumer Affairs, and she helped make it such that the money was prioritized for peers and for getting
Mm.
people out of hospital. So we said let's develop a model where peers help people get out of hospital.
Yeah.
Um, and so we began that in 5 state hospitals. Um, Along the way, we were also being approached by Commission on Quality of Care, and we did help them do a survey on seclusion and restraint. So our people who had been secluded and restrained could talk about that, what that was
Yeah.
like, and try to change policy. Then I saw that if we're going to move to a recovery system, providers have to change their ideas, their
Mhm.
values, their practices. So we created the training collective.
Mm.
So at that point, we're doing training, we're doing peer support, and we're doing advocacy. And we began working on our annual conference. And those 4 things are who we are. We advocate, we
Yeah.
educate, we demonstrate the power of peer support, and we celebrate like nobody's business
Yeah.
at
I
our
love
conference.
those conferences. I've been to several of them. Yeah. They're so good. What year was the first one, Harvey?
It was at 1981 at a state hospital in Syracuse, New York, Hutchins.
Uh, uh,
It was started in state hospitals, then it was in local colleges, then little hotels, and then we moved it to the Catskills.
yeah. Yeah.
It's been for years.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
that really is an example. I think the conference is the perfect expression of what we wanted, what's best about our organization, our people.
Mhm.
It's a celebration nakedly of joy, of
Mhm.
love,
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
community, we have spiritual, we have healers, we have, sense of retreat sense. There's artists, guitar players,
Yeah.
some of the well-known ones in our movement. So we really developed, I think, this sense of joy, and certainly nothing to do with we're the only ones in the hotel. People
Yeah.
can be exactly who they are
Yeah.
and support each other. And I love it. I've always loved it. Um,
I think the
so,
setting is so good too, being in nature like that, not in a city, but out where people can
well,
breathe.
do me a favor, put that in writing and send me an email on that because
Okay.
we're having a
You know, I,
discussion.
one of the things about the conference that amazes me, Harvey, and I think I have shared this with you, is one of my first I mean, I've been to the conferences in a couple conferences in the 90s, but as a person that works for at NIAPers and the Alliance, uh, I think there's a picture in my mind that sort of encapsulates what it's about. And there was this gentleman, this was at the old Hudson Valley, Harvey, where they had the grand piano in the corner. And he's just playing so beautifully. And
I remember this. Yeah.
he's kind of disheveled, and there's people just all around him. And I love music, so I am listening to him play. And the person next to me says, he really plays beautifully, and I just didn't know that. And I'm like, oh, are you like related, or who are you? And she says, oh, I'm his therapist.
Oh,
And that was such an eye opener to me
yeah.
that
Yeah.
you
She
had
didn't
to
know that about
come
me.
to the NIAPers Alliance conference to learn that about a person. You see people not in their sickness, but in their wellness. And that
Yeah.
image has always struck me as kind of what the conference is about.
Yeah. That's
It's
such a
beautiful.
perfect example of, I think, what the recovery movement brought. I mean, so many things, but the whole focus on what's strong and not what's wrong,
Yeah, yeah.
balancing that out.
I'm going to just pull the camera back. I mean, pull the clock back a little bit. I left something out, which was when I was working at the club, I met a man named Ed Knight.
Oh, yes.
And Ed Knight really brought me into the movement. So I was a little
Oh,
later than others. He introduced me to all the movement people.
oh,
So through him and others, I met Judy Chamberlain and
uh-huh.
Joe Rogers, Dan Fisher, there were Leonard Roy Frank, Glenn Bassman, all the people that you would associate,
Yeah.
David Oakes, with the movement. And it was an eye opener for me. And I was eating it up. I was just learning about it. It fit with my desire to be free and see people get free, and not to be helping people just be fit into society and that sort of thing. So I was very taken with that and very inspired by all those folks. And Len, at the conference that we're talking about, we had invited Judy Chamberlain to come get her Lifetime Achievement Award, but she was very ill. And it turned out she wasn't going to be able to make the conference. And Laura Prescott and I, we had a cell phone and we held it up, and 500 people said to Judy, "Thank you, Judy. Thank you, Judy."
Oh, gosh.
And it's a real moment that we all
Yeah. Yeah.
cherish about that.
Yeah. Mhm.
So, I mean, I think it's in terms of the alliance, I think what we've tried to do is mix a number of things, certainly about alternatives, uh, people being, really defining themselves, self-determination and choice in our advocacy, social determinants of health. We helped bring the half-fare benefit to New York City for people with disabilities, psychiatric disability. We helped bring in the Medicaid buy-in so people could go to work and keep their Medicaid.
Mhm.
Um, so we were focused on, it wasn't just, I have to say, anti-psychiatry or anti-medication.
Mhm. Mhm.
A lot of my friends who I cherish and I learned from had that experience. They were traumatized. They had been restrained. They had been force medicated.
Mhm.
I didn't have that experience, but I had a burning desire to fight for freedom
Mhm.
and self-determination and definition.
Mhm.
So I was naturally just taken with folks and absorbed everything I could. But I think one place I've differed, and maybe other people, is that I'm okay with my diagnosis. I'm okay with my psychiatrist, and I'm okay with my medication. It is 1/10 of who I am and what I do,
Yeah, yeah,
and the difference is I get to choose that, and too many people don't.
yeah.
But I have a rich sort of toolbox of what's my recovery is about, and a lot of it is in that conference, like all those things, music,
Yeah.
spirituality,
Yeah.
community, um, sharing, all of that. So
Something I come away from those conferences with, I think I'm going to call it truth telling. Um, there's not a lot of pretending or pretense among people. It's one of the few conferences left that is real that way. It's just real.
well, I think you're like me then, and you hate small talk, right?
Yes.
I hate small talk, and I need to get right to it right away. Um, and at the conference, you're right. People come like they do in self-help meetings, which I've always been so impressed with. You go around the room and people go right for their inner truth. There's no
Yes.
bullshit,
Yes. Yes.
And
Yes.
I just love to watch, even if it's pain or joy,
Yeah.
people opening up and talking from that place. And yeah, I agree with you that the conference is a place where you have permission to be who you are and share. People, I've seen people cry and not necessarily have to be so taken out of that, just respected for where they are in that moment. So
Something Gene often says is, he says, if you sit down with a room full of peers, it'll take you 5 minutes to get to what the issues are. If you sit down in a room full of therapists, it'll take 2 hours. Because the peers just go there. They don't have they're not trying to impress anybody. They're just coming from themselves.
So, Len, I wonder if you can take the liberty of asking you, because I've kind of sketched out, I think, how, how the Association of Psychosocial Clubs, the Association of Psych Rehab Services, and now is the Alliance for Rights and Recovery, which we rebranded last year, recognizing that we wanted to make it clear we're not a trade association,
Mhm, mhm.
and that we're about people, and that we're about the values of rights and recovery. So we took that name. But Len was a big part of that process, helping us get there and developing so much of what happens at the Alliance. So, Len, you want to tell your own story and
Yeah,
bring us?
sure. Thank you, Harvey. Um, the backstory. Um, so one of my first jobs in the mental health world was in 1990, and I was on a behavioral health science unit. So they called them back then. I don't know if they call them that anymore. I hope not. And I remember I was hired as a mental health assistant, and part of my responsibilities were just to kind of talk with people and do one-on-ones. And um, I remember very specifically that within the first 6 months, I talked to a lot of the people that were there, and they were sharing gut-wrenching stories of abuse, of domestic violence. And I remember going back to the team of nurses at the time, maybe one social worker, but there were primary nurses. And I said, this is what I'm hearing. It sounds important to me. And I'll never forget what they said. It's not. Has nothing to do with their illness.
Hmm. Hmm.
That was a wake-up call for me. And I didn't last long there. So I like within another 9 months, I was gone. And I found my way to um, an IPRT, which is a type of program that we have here, intensive psychiatric rehabilitation treatment program we had here back in the 90s and into the early 2000s that I found my way there, and um, I fell in love with the employment part of the work that gets done
Mhm.
and how important employment is, and
Oh, so powerful.
how employment really plays a really key piece in a person's recovery. Now, at this point, I was not out. I was not referencing myself as a peer at all. But I was just so gung ho about the differences that I saw in people once they were able to get employed and
Mhm.
how quickly they could make progress in their recovery goals.
Mhm.
So I did that for a number of years, and Harvey knows I still have a very deep passion for. In fact, I was hired on at the Alliance for that very reason when I came aboard in 2012. But in 2005, I had my own experience of being hospitalized. And as you know, Harvey, you did a great job of kind of describing like the blackness that like the hole that just doesn't get there's there's no there's no end to it. And I felt that way. I felt like it was just so dark and there was nowhere to go. And the only place that people felt like I should go was the hospital. And I found myself in the hospital and I was not happy about it. I frankly did not want to be, quote, one of those people.
Mhm.
It really upended my whole view of myself.
Mhm.
And after spending some time there, I was working at the time. So my psychiatrist said to me, well, you're going to have to put off work for a while. I don't really see it in your future.
Mhm.
And thank God I was an employment specialist because I said, no, I think you're wrong there. I think employment actually does work for people.
Yeah.
Um, and then I quickly found another psychiatrist once I got out of the hospital.
Yeah.
Um, but I always say I didn't find my recovery in the hospital. It actually wasn't until a couple of years later that I began my recovery journey. That
Mhm.
was back in 2005. But it was a couple of years later that I found my recovery journey, and I had to find it in a 12-step group. I had to find it
Mhm.
in a Celebrate Recovery group that I think they're all over the country, but there's a couple here where I'm from. And and then I always say there was let's say there was a Wizard of Oz moment for me where the the light came on, the color came on from viewing myself as strictly a provider and then viewing myself as a person who has mental health challenges.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
you see the world quite differently
Mhm. Mhm.
when you begin to view yourself from the mental health challenges that you have.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then I wound up at the Alliance in 2012. And honestly, I say this a lot because it's true. And I felt like the Alliance, NIAPRS at the time, was the first job I ever had that I could bring my whole self to work.
Mhm.
I didn't have to leave
Mhm.
my mental health challenges back at home.
Mhm.
I could just be who I was.
Yeah.
And it was liberating. It was, you talk about freedom, Harvey. It really gave me the freedom to become um, who I am to be today.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, and I think people,
go
yeah,
ahead. I've been
I
very
think,
blessed because I've had a lot of people while at the Alliance, and actually even before that I just didn't recognize that were leaders and that were like Edie Schwartz and now Harvey and
Mhm.
um, Joe Nobling when I worked at the IPRT that were real leaders and kind of were able to show me the way and guide me and give me really good pearls of wisdom. So I have been so lucky in that respect.
I want to just back up a little bit on that that I'm going to call it whiplash moment of
Okay.
moving from being a provider to I'll call it a receiver of services. At least in identity, um,
Yes.
that's a big moment for people. I remember my own experience of just struggling with symptoms of depression, anxiety, an eating disorder, a few other things. but still going to work, because work was what kept me, I don't know what to say, kept me not necessarily sane, but kept me out of the hospital. I've
Yeah.
never been hospitalized because of my work. And I finally got to the point, this is when I moved to Phoenix. And I just remember sitting in on all these case management staffings, they call them, and just feeling so bad every time the way people were talked about. And I thought, I just have to tell them that I'm one of those people. That's the only way. I mean, maybe that will fix things. And I remember when I did, I thought, okay, I better start packing because they're going to kick me out of here now. Now that they know I'm one of those people. And they probably thought about it, but they didn't. But like you're saying, when we can tell our own truth, things just open up. Everything changes. I mean, I didn't get fired. I muddled along for a while and everybody muddled along with me. But then I started knowing what to do. I started knowing what to do because of that opening. I'm just shining the light on this in case we have viewers that are like not in a place where they can say that yet. When we can say it, it's just so powerful for us and everybody else too.
It's really important when we interview people over the years. We look for people who can say we, not they.
Yes.
You're
Yeah.
talking, and we're a collective voice. And who really brought that out of me was Chaco, because he always spoke about we, and I but I came into the fullness of really just fully being in this community and us being together as this we.
Mhm.
That is, I agree with you. That's just so essential. It's a much less, more joyous place to be in this we, in
Absolutely.
this community, than
Yes.
trying to fit into a world that really is the other. That world is the other world.
Mhm. And like Lynn is saying, we can bring our whole self to work then,
Yeah.
not worrying about it.
Lori, I like what you had to say about, you basically just had to say something. You had your brave moment. And I think we all have those moments, those watershed moments that really, it's like, okay, I'm gonna do it and we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
But it really takes a lot of bravery and guts to do it.
Well, I think I'm going to add desperation to that
Okay, yeah, that's
because
probably true.
finally you can't stand it any longer.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
For me, it's the key. I always say, if you're an advocate, you have to have outrage,
Uh,
and that's been a real driver for me. It's that anger has driven me throughout. I don't want to be around that. I want to change that. I can't stand that. Can't believe we're not having a real conversation here. So everybody is sort of different. I think for me, I have some of the outrage of the movement,
Mhm.
but I've tried to operate in some strategic, incremental ways that I think have been productive around fighting for rights and things like that.
Oh, yeah, you've been
But still
extremely
always come
good.
from outrage.
But I think for you,
When you
Harvey,
say I
that
can't stand it, I mean, I was identifying with, I feel that anger again and again, and that's great. Enough already.
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, but I think what's interesting about you, Harvey, is you have a controlled outrage. So you're not just throwing bombs.
Mhm.
You're outraged about something, but you always pivot very quickly to solutions. Like, what can we do here?
Mhm.
And that makes you a rarity.
Mhm. Mhm.
Well,
Mhm.
growing up in
Anybody
a
can throw
home where
bombs.
growing up in I'm telling you, I credit my mother, who was relentless and made me relentless, because to just live in a home, she wouldn't talk to you for a couple of days if you were not on the team.
Mhm.
So, I learned how to operate in a hostile environment, let's put it that way,
Mhm. Mhm.
and to not get killed off in that hostile environment. And I feel like in my work, I operate in an oppositional, if not hostile environment.
Mhm.
And I've tried to say, oh, this is the language, this is the people, this is the idea, to get through. Because I will say I'm angry, but I also want to win. I want our people and want us to win. And winning is not always indulging the anger, but
Mhm.
directing it in strategic ways,
Yeah.
whether it's training contracts or peer new peer models, but certainly fighting what we're fighting now. And I'm just going to make a complete left turn, which I'm prone to do, and say Len and I were talking earlier. This is a fucking country that is at war with itself on race and on gender and on all these things. And we are putting on an event in a month, and we're going to have a full plenary on DEI.
Hmm.
And we are not going to stand down because right now these algorithms are finding DEI in the names of people and companies and government and eliminating them. That's the environment we're in. It's the worst environment I've seen.
Mhm.
And I think we're kind of, in a way, we're kind of prepared for that. We're not used to an easy life. We're used to having to really suffer through or
Mhm.
find our way through in community,
Mhm.
hostile forces, and or feeling abandoned or on your own. So in a way that prepares us, to deal with a terrible environment like that,
Mhm.
and to be courageous in the middle of it, because you have no choice. You're either going to
Yeah.
give in
Yeah.
and lose. So
Thank you for that, Harvey. Um, that's one of the truths we're up against right now. So it's baffling. I hardly know how to deal with it.
I'll say to you when I've said, I think about the 50s. Could you
Yeah.
have been gay? Could you have come out in any way? Did women have any
Mm.
respect and dignity? Did people of color have any of that? Was it a white controlled world?
Mhm.
Uh, dare I say it? I'm not prejudiced against Christians, but white Christian world.
Mhm.
And so I think if unless you fit a certain profile, you were the other. A lot
Yeah.
of others out there back in the 50s who quietly, maybe with outrage, developed the 60s. But there are people
Yeah.
now who have outrage about everything that we did from the 60s to today and want to take it all down and immediately. And
Well, maybe this is I always try to look for the positive stuff because if I don't, I get depressed and then I can't pull myself out of it.
well, I go with outrage and that helps me get through it
Yeah,
because it is tough to
that's
look
a
at.
good one. That's a good one too. Maybe this is setting us up for another 60s.
I was just thinking that, Lori.
Yeah,
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 That is a beautiful thought.
yeah.
yeah.
And the young people deserve that. I feel terrible that my daughters have to experience this, what's going on in this country now. So the idea that we would be creating the next a generation who is invited to, take control, take power,
Mhm, mhm,
from this what's happening now.
mhm.
That's a beautiful thought. I thank you both for that.
Yeah.
That's hopeful.
Yes. Well,
I mean,
Lynn,
I'm angry even if there isn't hope. I'm going to try to find some, but you've taken us there, and I appreciate it.
Lynn, continue your story. We got so excited we cut you off.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, so I wound up at the Alliance and I found a home. Um, did a lot of training. Harvey's been very generous, and that's one of the things about the Alliance that I really love is that, and it starts with Harvey because he's the one that's like on the scene all over the place, and he has given many people, Chaku, myself, Edie, I could name dozens of people that he has given the opportunities to do national work
Mhm.
and state work because we do a lot of work at the state, but he puts people on the map. Um, and I think that's a beautiful thing that,
It is. Yeah,
no ego to
yeah,
like, oh, no, it's just got to be me.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so so I've been doing work over the years with helping peer-run organizations to develop infrastructure and capacity build so that they're stronger and ready to survive
Mhm.
in the larger healthcare uh, movement. And That's a big passion of mine
Mhm.
that, and we've had to do that here at the Alliance, so we don't do anything that we haven't already started to at least do ourselves. And so, getting a strong fiscal, getting a fiscal houses in order, having a strong board of directors, making sure that your HR practices are current. And your my first day on the job as the COO, which is back in 2019, um, Harvey calls me on the weekend and says, "Oh, by the way, I think our server went down." So the first day on the job, I'm like, "Okay, so I'm gonna get right into it here." We had to find another, tech company to
Yeah.
because we weren't using the very best. Had a server in a closet, and
Yeah.
so we went to some cloud-based. But it's that kind of thing because if we want to compete,
Mhm.
and I always say this, we are in an environment where peer services is in demand. And so we're in demand. We have the experience and we have the um, of what people want. Um, the only thing that's missing is the business acumen.
Mhm.
We got what people want
Yeah.
and people are willing to buy it,
Yeah.
but we have to be business ready to do business.
Mhm.
Otherwise, we're going to lose opportunities. And even worse, if we actually get into some kind of contractual agreement with a healthcare provider and then we don't do due diligence, then
Mhm.
they're just going to say, see what I told you? It's the peer-run organizations that can't get their
Yeah.
stuff together.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's not a good place to be. It's a great place to be that everybody wants us, but we have to be ready to meet that.
We do. We do. I've just seen so many peer-run programs around the country just evaporate because they weren't able to defend themselves. They weren't able to
Yeah.
say, this is what we did and this was the result.
Yeah.
This is why we're valuable. They
Yeah.
were, but they weren't able to express it in a way that could be metabolized by the
Yeah.
larger system.
I get it because people get into this job because of passion and because their own lived experience,
Mhm.
which is great. It's really what keeps it pure.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
but you do need to take the steps that we just talked about to be relevant in the space that we're in.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just want to say a quickie around
Yeah, go ahead.
what Len just said too. Everything we do, we expect that we're going to be teaching. I mean,
Mhm.
that's the way it's worked out for us. We've done peer services with the express idea of creating models that we can teach others. Even as we're doing them, I'm thinking, and they are, imagine a time that what you just learned is going to be on a slide, or
Hmm.
you're going to be standing in front of a group because we're learning it right now and it's so valuable. And just be aware we're on this continuum. And
Mhm.
what Len just said, what he's had to do to our agency. I mean,
Mhm.
Len is just an amazing, you can see, right?
Oh, yeah.
Between grounding and operations and getting the trains to run and all of that, but also driving the train and helping it stay on track and
Yeah.
having that spirit. He's very unique that way. We're very lucky
And
to
we
have.
we still have a ways to go, really. I mean, honestly, we do. And now we've got a new chief strategy officer, Shannon Hickney. She's another one who's, really gets it, gets the peer model. She gets um, the business side. It's helping us to even go. I think we're going to go even further.
Hmm. Let me ask you guys this. I worry about this for several years now. Well, a few years anyway. Is in my experience, the peer movement started, it was born in kind of a desperate moment. And we had to kind of fight our way out of an identity of illness. And the energy it took to do that was invigorating. And we kind of got out of it. We got established as, peers are helpful, they're good, they have a contribution to make. And in my mind, it's not static. I love what you're saying about learning. We have to keep learning and evolving. We can't just say, this is who we are, and because this is who we were. We have to continue the pathway forward and step over the landmines and a few other things and keep growing ourselves somehow. I'm worried that we're not doing that very well. I'm worried that we're kind of kicking back a little bit and going, yeah, we're peers. We got this.
I think the peer, you're right, Lori, the progression is we start out as a rights movement.
Yeah.
We recognize that supporting each other is necessary. Models are created to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're in the business of offering peer support. There was a crossroads where the rights people, the rights mission became, and then another opening came in a pathway, which is the business, offering these services, which cost money. Now you're running an agency. And somewhere along the way, sometimes the peer agencies are not focused on rights anymore.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They're focused on keeping the doors open and running a business.
Yeah.
And that's I think our challenge is to recapture the roots of why we do this whole thing.
I think that's the secret to it. It's not going backwards. It's remembering why we're here in the first place and what it took to get here.
Yeah, and we serve this higher God, this higher mission of bringing this message. And as Len points out, we have to be better than good because people will diminish us. But it's finding that balance between keeping the fire going and yet being a politician, being a business person, but being a person at the end of it, in the middle of it at all, and making it all work. Because right now, some of us are too focused on the business of peer support. Some of us might be focused on rights, but don't necessarily are doing that in a vacuum of the environment of politics and services and things like that. Somehow we have to balance it all. We can do that. What I've come to realize in our development, in creating advocacy and a community, helping to foster that, in creating peer services and training in that area, I realize now that our peer services are really policy solutions that are the alternative to coercion and all of the enemies we have. That peer services actually are not just services. When they talk about coercion because they believe you can't engage people and they have to be coerced, well, we know how to engage people.
Yes.
So we don't need that system, that payment system, that approach. So, I mean, I think we've kind of brought that together, and I would like those of us that are doing peer services to see them as not just that moment with people or that business moment, but that is the revolution still is, and being able to step up and have evidence of this other way of doing things and that it works and that it's cost effective and all those businessy things. And we're in a period of desperation. Let's say we're going into a period where we're going to be moved
we need
into
to not
that.
waste it. Let's not waste our desperation.
Let's do it again.
Gene and I went to Cuba, I don't know, maybe 3 years ago or something, maybe 4. Because we love salsa dancing. So we went to Cuba for some salsa lessons of all things. And but that was the least of what we learned in Cuba, because there the revolution is still alive. I mean, there's signs about it. People talk about it. It's like that's their identity. And we came back thinking, there's something to that, to holding on to that, that revolution. And they say, we aren't a socialist government, we're a revolutionary government.
Great.
Yeah. I just wanted to bring it up because I think we could borrow something from where they are.
Holding on to that revolution. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I will say at this moment, where we are is so needed and wanted beyond what we can possibly I mean, every other day, like in this fight against, on behalf of the movement, speaking against federal policy, people came to us saying, would you help? And we are in a fight of our lives against forced treatment in New York, and where we were going to find the energy to take this national issue on, but people wanted us to.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're trying to figure out how to do that. And I say this to you, Lori, to anybody watching, we're looking for employees. We need good workers who want to carry out this mission. We could grow so much more quickly with the right, having people. So if people, for any reason, are watching this and like what we've talked about and want to work in an organization like that, we actually need you because we are so needed, honestly, and we're so overburdened as we are now, and we have so many ideas about how to grow, but we need people that could hit the ground running,
We're going to put your contact information up. So if people want to get a hold of you, it'll be right there on the screen.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Well, it's just been, I knew it was going to be great talking to you guys, and it's just been wonderful.
Thank you.
I just love your stories. I love the story of how the Alliance was born. And I feel like it was born just in time, just in time for this next big jump forward. So thank you guys for doing.
I want to, Lori, before you go, I want to acknowledge you. And I mean, you have I've always seen the spirit you bring forward. The joy, the peace, the respect, the dignity and loveliness of it. You're very important in this movement and in this work, in this humble and gentle way that you operate. You really inspire people, and I'm glad you're with us. And let's keep doing more of it. So I'm glad this worked. I just love the idea of being with you a little bit. So
yeah, I love being with you guys too.
At that time.
You just reminded me we could kind of end on this, because maybe this is kind of a battle cry. I'm not sure. But when I would train our staff, they would be all worried about, well, do I know this? Do I know that? Well, what about this? And I would say, look, there's only two things you have to do. Just be inspiring and irresistible. And
there you go.
It'll work. The people that come to you for help will get it. Just focus on that. Stop trying to get it right. So maybe that's kind of what, we need the outrage. We need the strategies. But underneath that, I think we just need to be inspiring and irresistible. I think that goes.
I like that. Lori, you've just described yourself.
Oh,
which is a good thing.
Yes, I agree totally.
Oh, you guys are too nice to me. Jean's not going to be able to stand me for the rest of the day.
Dory, just one teeny last thing is I think that moves all of us here, and maybe we haven't talked about it enough, is faith.
Oh, yeah.
Is God is a calling. I think we're all called to be this.
I do
it drives us, whether we're irresistible or outraged or we're relentless in the way that we are. And it's because I think we have this calling, imperative, and this nurturance of from God. I don't know how else to say it.
I've always had that feeling, Harvey, that this was a calling, and that this is our mission.
Totally.
It's important.
God is asking a lot of us, though. It can be hard some days, right?
Yeah.
But he believes in us. So there you go.
And the feeling is mutual.
Yes. Well, love you guys very much. And thanks
again.
Love
you too, Lori. Thanks.
Well, there you have it, my dear friends. Harvey and Len from the Alliance for Rights and Recovery. I just know you're going to remember this for a long time. I do. So thank you for joining us. Always good to have you there. And we'll see you next time. And in the meantime, I'm just sending you lots of love and peace and joy, and keep doing all the wonderful things that you're doing. Thank you very much for joining us.